the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom is being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everyone. My name's Andy Biggs. I'm Arizona's congressman from our 5th congressional district. It's good to be with you today for another one of my semi-regular podcasts called What's the Biggs Idea? I have with me today special guest Julie Kirchner. She's with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, FAIR. I just call it FAIR. And she initially worked in FAIR's government relations and previously served as FAIR's executive director from 2007 through 2015. Ms. Kirchner has years of hands-on work in our nation's immigrant agency. She knows this subject inside and out. She served as senior advisor to the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, served on U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services as their ombudsman, and has been appointed to serve as the first senior advisor at the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman, which is an independent agency within DHS created by Congress in 2020. Julie received her BA from Yale University and her law degree with high distinction at the University of Iowa College of Law. Julie, thanks for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yeah,
we're glad to have you here. There's so much to talk about with regard to the border. People tend to forget about it. It's almost like they've got Stockholm syndrome or something like that, where there's so much of it going on. But I wanted to just focus on the Tucson sector. Now I live in the Tucson sector. I live in Gilbert, a couple hours off of the border, but we're the Tucson sector. It is on pace to exceed 700,000 encounters this
Stunning.
year. Yeah,
absolutely stunning.
Which is more than twice what they had last year, as a matter of fact. So the way to think of it is from 18 to 2020, we averaged 60,000 encounters a year with illegal aliens. In 2021, it was 190,000. In 2022, it was 250,000. Last year, 373, and this year, we're almost to 400,000 people already. And so just the last couple of weeks, just for people to get more context before we get into the meat of this, from May 18th to 24th, 7,400 apprehensions. May 25th through 31, 7,800 encounters. There were narcotics, firearms seized, human smuggling rings broken up, federal criminal cases going, and convicted sex offenders that were encountered. And these are the people that we're encountering, Julie. These aren't the people that...
Exactly.
And we're going to get into that in a second, but these are not the gotaways. The gotaways, Tucson sector is really wide open, a lot of places without border fencing at all, rugged, hilly country. A lot of people get in and are able to sneak in successfully. We see that. So we're going to cover 2 topics today, and then anywhere else you want to go with regard to this. But let's go there first. This was going to be my second topic, but as long as I'm kind of introducing you to this. You got the gotaways, and Christopher Wray, the FBI director, has said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have a national security event because of how the porous border that we have. Give us some information you have on that. Let's talk about the Jordanians who, and other things happening.
Well, it's true. And just to back up a little bit, what you just talked about, those numbers are just a slice of what's going on, the whole border. So if Tucson's on pace to exceed 700,000, we're on pace nationwide to exceed about 3.4 million. I was crunching the numbers before I came on. So it's the magnitude of the crisis is just insane. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, as you're talking about, is the number of terrorists and criminals, just criminals. I mean, we can talk about the terrorists in just a second here, but just criminals. Last year, the border officials nabbed maybe 25,000, roughly, maybe 26,000, had criminal warrants, criminal convictions. And these are people who are trying to get in illegally. And it's crazy. And then we can talk about the terrorists. I mean, when you count the ones who were apprehended by the Border Patrol, and last year that was, roughly 170 something, you add in the ones at the ports of entry, where the drive-through, the official ports of entry, you're looking over 730 aliens alone who were on our terror watch list, who were apprehended at our borders, all trying to get in.
And that's just the ones that we were able to
the ones
encounter.
we were able to,
The other thing too is it takes some amount of vetting when you actually encounter people, because we're releasing these people all over. Most of these people are being released in the country. So the question is, what vetting are they even doing?
Yeah. Well, they are. I mean, I do want to give credit to the Border Patrol and our border agents.
Absolutely.
They're doing the best they can, but they only have a certain amount of tools, right? And if other countries don't give us information, if we don't have information sharing agreements, if we don't have diplomatic relations with some of these countries, we're not getting information. And or it may be coming slowly, right? It may not be coming. They're under such pressure to release everyone as fast as they can. You might get a response from a foreign government if they have a good cooperation with the United States, but it may not come fast enough. And then you release them, and then they're free to roam around the United States. They use a little piece of paper to get on planes, and off we go. And this is what we're seeing, actually, going back to the scary incident regarding those Jordanian nationals.
Tell us about that.
That was just a few weeks ago, and two Jordanian nationals pull up to Quantico base. It's the Marine Corps base in Virginia, actually not too far, just south of D.C., and they pretend that they're going to deliver something on base. And from what I understand, there's a whole sort of little base life, village life stores and things of that sort. So they say they're going to deliver packages. And the smart and quick thinking guards didn't think it was right. And they threw up the vehicle barriers before these guys could get on. Apparently they ignored orders to stop. And it turned out there were two Jordanian nationals. But then it gets even more interesting, because one, as far as we know, and of course the information can change, but our best information is that one was an illegal alien who came in just April last month, and the other one was a student overstay, an F visa overstay. And so the question is, how did they know each other?
Right.
How did they know each other? How did they hook up and get this van? And what kind of driver's licenses did they have? What kind of IDs did they have? Sure. I mean, this is the crazy stuff that's going on, and this is the impact of open borders. And if you don't think that your life is being impacted by it, you need to, stand up and look around, because the evidence is everywhere. And what we're seeing, these open borders, think about it. There are now, the government now we have lots of reports and information from the administration that they're planning to give government-issued biometric IDs to illegal aliens they release into the country. Apparently, they anticipate these aliens being here for a very long time.
Yeah, well, I think we all anticipate they're going to be here for a very long time.
Under this administration.
Because you're looking at well over, we're probably looking 8 to 12 million people in the Biden administration by the time it's all said and done.
It could be, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so, but when you start looking at this, so we were out of session last week. I keep following the news, and you cannot go a day without seeing some heinous, terrible act caused by an illegal alien who shouldn't be in this country, and we should have done something to stop him. the agents on the border, you're right, they're doing all they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot of this, so when we talk about vetting, how do they vet people? It's a lot of it is what I call garbage in, garbage out, because they're throwing away their IDs. If you go down to, let's say, the Yuma sector,
I've seen the IDs scattered
everywhere. So they get rid of them because when they go in, and I've actually stood there and talked to them and had people say, "Well, we're from Russia." And I said, well, "Okay, so I have access to a Russian translator. We get the translator on the phone. She starts talking. We're ready to talk in Russian. They say, actually, we're not really from Russia. We're from Ukraine." They will flow and they can be whatever they want to be, because we have to take them at their word, because, as you say, many countries we don't even have diplomatic relationships with that are good enough to tell who they are. But others, even in their own internal country, they don't have
exactly. They just don't have the sort of IT infrastructure to do this. And they'll come and they'll make up their own identities. And then again, I mean, talk about another security threat. They get that little piece of paper from Homeland Security when they leave the border station. They get on a bus, they get on a plane, and we know nothing about them. And it's so frustrating for those of us at FAIR. You know, FAIR has been around for 45 years.
Wow.
We went through the first amnesty in '86. We went through all sorts of laws that were passed in the 1990s, and certainly through 9/11. And the passage of Real ID and things of that sort that required, a real solid ID, where you bring birth certificates. And I know it's a pain for everyone, but this is why they do it. It's because there has to be some sort of guarantee, or at least a reasonable guarantee, that you are who you say you are. And we're talking millions, as you said. I mean, millions. The official tally of encounters over the last 3.5 years under the Biden administration is over 9 million.
Right.
And we know most of them have been released, and most of them are getting work permits. And then there's 1.8 million gotaways. That's the estimate right now.
Right. And even the gotaways, they have changed how they count gotaways now. They changed how they detect gotaways. We just don't know what their real number is. And that's really where a lot of your danger is, because if you're just think about this, just logically, when it's so easy to actually get access and get into our country by just going to the border and surrendering, which I watch. You've been down there, I've been down there. We've literally watched groups of hundreds of people will just come across and give up and sit down and wait for the CBP. Why would they why would you have a couple million people sneaking into the country when you don't have to sneak into the country, because we're going to deliver you? It's easy to surmise that those people have malevolent intentions. They want to cause trouble. They're packing drugs in. Maybe they're human smugglers. Maybe they have a criminal history in the U.S. So when you talked about the 25 to 30 whatever thousands of people
with criminal backgrounds,
that's U.S. Those people are committing crimes in the U.S. If they committed a crime in Guatemala, we might or might not even know.
Yeah, that's it, and it's very scary. It was interesting. There was one of the networks had an interview. I think it was Bill Malugin. I'll give him, a shout out.
Yeah.
Who was down on the border reporting, and there were migrants coming in, and they were interviewing people, and one of them said, this is really scary how easily I walked in. He said, I'm a normal person, but I met a lot of shady characters on the way, and they're all coming in right behind me. And this is so it's shocking what we see. I mean, so for example, it just broke, I think last night or early this morning, I had it in my inbox. A story in New York, a Venezuelan migrant shot 2 cops.
Right.
And it's, he was going around on a scooter. He was a suspect in some of these robberies where they steal women's purses or phones or whatever. And he was speeding as fast as he could on a scooter, going the wrong way down a one-way street, and the cops were trying to catch up with him. He ran on foot, and then finally, when they did catch up with him, he turned around and shot. And this is a story in the paper this morning, and we really don't know who we're letting into this country. And so some of them, even the ones who have just the intent to work and make a better life, they still know it's wrong. They still know they're violating the laws. You don't just pay your life savings to the cartels.
Right.
And then magically show up on the U.S. side of the border one day. I mean, everyone knows it's you're violating the law.
They all do, from every country. They all know that they're violating our law. And boy, there's so far. I mean, we could wander down. I don't want to wander down that path too far, but I mean, it all goes back to Secretary Mayorkas issuing that letter in August, September of 2021, basically saying, you know what, if they're here, we're not going to, if they've committed a crime, we're not necessarily going to remove them. We don't view that as a removable offense.
And this actually goes to another point I wanted to make, and I know I'm kind of covering a lot of ground here, but the Office of Inspector General just came out with this audit, the parole programs.
Right.
We've been
Yes.
talking a lot about that.
Yeah.
And they did a deep dive on the Afghan parole program. So
Oh,
after
yeah.
Afghanistan fell,
Yes.
and what they actually specifically cited was that memo that said if you're here illegally, being illegal alone is not sufficient to initiate a deportation proceeding, if you can believe it.
Right.
I mean, it's like they're making up the law as they go along. And this Inspector General report cited that memo and said that even when there were serious and egregious public safety concerns with some of these Afghan paroles, because they weren't vetted properly, they were just all brought over immediately, ICE wasn't taking action because their orders were to stand down.
Yes, that's right.
And it's just shocking that even though, you were saying, FBI Director Christopher Wray, all the red lights are flashing, the alarm bells are
Right.
going off. They've never seen this kind of sort of security threat, the situation since 9/11. And he is saying this publicly, and yet we are not taking more action to stop the flow at the border. And what really drives me nuts is that once you let them in, it's so hard for our agents to go and find them, and it's dangerous for them.
Right.
You're putting our agents in greater danger.
Absolutely right. And so, and ICE has been hamstrung. They can't do their job. And this leads to the second topic I really wanted to talk to you about. And I'll just get back to the numbers for a second. So in April, I think the number was 130,000 encounters at the border, which is down, from 300 some odd thousand. And so the left in America is saying, well, see, something's happening here. Well, I want people to understand very clearly that before February of 2021, if you had ever had a single month with 180,000 people, you would have, your hair would have been on fire. Jay Johnson, Obama's DHS guy, he said, if we have over 1,000 a day of apprehensions, we've got a crisis on our hand. He said, I can't imagine 2,000 or 3,000. Well, here's the deal. 180,000 is 6,000 plus a day.
It is.
And it is still a massive crisis. But part of it is because, now there's this agreement maybe going on with AMLO. I'll scratch your back. There's an election going on down in Mexico. There's an election going on up here. Okay, we get that. We understand that. But for 3+ years, President Biden has said, I don't have unilateral authority. He felt he had unilateral authority by executive order to issue a bunch of executive orders within 72 hours of being elected president to dismantle.
Oh, yeah, to rescind everything that was there before him.
Exactly. But he said, I can't do anything else. Now, all of a sudden, he seems to have found his way, and he's indicated he's going to issue some executive orders, oddly enough, just a few months before the election. So my question, Julie, for you is, what do these executive orders look like, and will they have an immediate impact on our border, do you
That's
think?
a good question. Well, we've heard a lot of chatter in D.C., and you have to, learn to read the tea leaves if you live here for any period of time.
That's right.
And what we've been hearing is that actually that it may come as soon as tomorrow. We've heard the AP is reporting that there's several mayors flying in to support the president in his announcement. We've also heard that it might look a little like the Senate bill that failed, and failed for good reason. It will probably use 212F authority. So there's a section in the Immigration and Nationality Act called Section 212, paragraph F, which gives the president very broad powers to deny entry of any aliens when the president determines that the entry would be not in the interest of the United States.
Just not to derail you, but just so people understand, people like you and I have been saying for years he has 212F authority.
Yeah.
He could exclude anybody he wants to, and he could do it in mass. He could do it by categories, etc. But he chose not to do it and said he didn't have that authority. But now he's found it.
Yeah. Well, and to say he didn't have that authority was absolutely disingenuous. You know, he's used that paragraph 212F before. He used it during COVID.
Yeah, as a matter
to
of fact.
restrict the entries of certain aliens when it wasn't in the national interest. So President Biden has used this authority before. He knows full well it's there. His team knows it's there. They just didn't want to be pushed to the point of having to do it. And now 3 years and 7 months into the administration and millions of aliens released into the country, and 5 months before an election, the president has decided, maybe I should do something. And what I'm expecting, and we'll see, I don't want to prejudge, but what I'm expecting is a lot like what we saw in the Senate bill. It looks good. The top line, the headline in all the papers will be great, great, great. It's going to give the president the power to, exclude all these aliens. But then there'll be exceptions and loopholes, and it won't apply to asylum seekers, and maybe it won't apply to parolees, and they'll carve out so many exceptions that it'll swallow the rule.
Yeah, well, so I was going to ask you, if he makes an exception for asylum seekers, who's left?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there are some, like a lot of these, some of them are claiming asylum too, but there are a lot of single adult males who are coming in who are not necessarily trying to lift their families and flee persecution. But it's either way. I mean, in the Senate bill, it just exempted any category that Homeland Security thought shouldn't fall under it. I mean, this is what we expect, and this is what happens when you have open borders advocates claim they're going to talk tough on immigration. The headline's great, but you got to look at the details.
Yeah, and so you think it might be as soon as tomorrow even. Well, if you've got mayors coming in for the photo op, then I would say you're probably pretty close. Yeah.
Well, that's what we'll see. I mean, that's what all the papers are reporting, but the president will act on his own schedule. So.
Yeah, I'm anticipating that it's going to be interesting to see. Because I hope you're wrong, but I don't think you are. I think you're right. I think this is going to be a much ado about nothing, and
I actually think the president would have waited longer, except for the first debate is going to be at the end of June. I think he had to do this now. Right.
Well, I mean, the flood's still going. AMLO is, I think, slowed down a little bit of the pass through, just a titch. But it's still going. My sources telling me still flowing like through the gap, and all that. Just the normal was not normal. The normal Biden era flow is all still coming, and so you might see some pent up demand as well after we get through some of this part of the election cycle. To be frank with you,
and I think it's shocking. And actually, I mean, I wonder if people don't stop and think about the fact that the Biden administration is actually asking Mexico and other Central American countries to do what he's not willing to do, which is secure their borders. Yeah. He really wants to push this problem off of his plate, however he does it. If he sends it to the states, if he sends it to the locals, if he sends it to local sheriffs, so be it. And if he sends the problem to our neighbors south of the border, so be it. But it's what he's doing to maintain open borders. It's unbelievable.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is not willing to let Texas, though, enforce it, right? I mean,
exactly.
It's kind of bizarre. But all of that, the reason Tucson sector is number one now, they've had a problem for a long time, but a lot of the cartels move these people. They're business folks, they're moving them west to the boot of New Mexico and Arizona. So, I mean, that's where you're seeing it right now. San Diego's getting hammered pretty good right now, too. So, But we haven't even covered the northern border. A lot of people forget about the northern border. How are we doing up there? Just getting some records up there as well, aren't we?
We have been getting, certainly the Swanton sector up there in New England has been hit really hard. And states like Massachusetts, well, some of them are coming up from the southern border, but certainly Maine, even Maine, is having problems with migrants. And they've had to clear out, sort of civic centers and all sorts to make shelters. Massachusetts has a right to shelter law. I mean, the whole state is been turned upside down to try and accommodate these migrants. So what we've seen at the northern border, and it's a little bit of a different problem. It's a little harder detect all of these aliens because traditionally there have been fewer resources put on the northern border. It hasn't been quite as much as a problem. And Canada, for the most part, has been a particularly good partner. Some of the asylum laws have been adjusted that make it easier for us to send, what should we say, disingenuous asylum seekers back over, and they're going to have to claim in Canada before they come here, things of that sort. So it's been a real problem. And you see, it's an interesting way for people who have a little money and I say that just because we're talking relative to, average families in the United States. For migrants who have some money, one of the best ways, the safest ways, right, rather than go up through the Darien Gap and up through Mexico, which is infested with drug cartels, much safer to fly to Canada and walk in or drive in somehow.
Yeah, and Canada has really liberal, if I understand right, really liberal visa laws.
Yeah.
So people can come in fairly easily and then try to come across. Well, Julie, we haven't exhausted the topic, but I think we're pretty close to exhausting our time. But this is a topic really that we could spend hours talking about and get into really the weeds. And I know you're on top of it. You do this for a living and do a great job. And we're grateful that you'd share your expertise with us today, Julie.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and we'll do this again. We'll keep watching, and we'll want to watch to see how this executive order from President Biden comes in, because he's finally doing something. So I don't want to be hypercritical of this guy because he's finally doing what I've said he had authority to do for probably 3 years now. I've been saying it. But I am curious to see what these executive orders are going to look like, because it's reported to be all-encompassing, this broad deal. And I'm like, okay, that makes me nervous in and of itself. So let's stay in touch and we'll watch that.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for joining us today on What's the Big's Idea. We'll be back next week, probably. And I always say that because the reality is this is a semi-regular podcast, but it's on almost every week. So thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you next time on What's the Big's Idea.